public programming that is part of something called Survival and Resistance. So my name is Alisha Vasquez, she, her, ella. I'm the co-director of the Mexican American Heritage and History Museum at the historic Sosa Carrillo House, which has been undergoing renovations kind of for the last year and a half, and we're gonna open soon. So we knew that we would be closed for a little while during this time of wanting to celebrate the 40th anniversary of local investigative journalist Jane Kay's articles that were published in the Arizona Daily Star in 1985. So we're calling this kind of this 40th anniversary retrospective of the trichloroethylene, or TCE, contamination that happened on Tucson's south side. Another thing that happened that same year is this group called Tucsonans for a Clean Environment formed. And these are folks who are kind of on the ground scholars and researchers who were your neighbors, your tias, your tios, your nana, who would go door to door to door to figure out, is there some sort of pattern of cancer clusters, of illnesses, of harm surrounding the Tucson airport and around the Raytheon, right? So from the late 1940s through the 1970s, we know that different manufacturers closely related to the war industry, but also other different types of technologies, dumped TCE directly into our groundwater. And so there was a huge community fight. Really quickly, the community knew something was wrong. They knew that their trees, their vegetation was not acting right, it was dying in some cases. People started to get sick. We started to see really weird cancer clusters, like a bunch of football players out at Sunnyside getting testicular cancer at 16. The community knew something was wrong. And so in multiple ways, since this first dumping of harm happened in the late 40s, there have been many people in the community that have stood up to this. The reason we're focusing this event on that kind of 40-year retrospective is based on Dr. Sonora Taylor's research called Disabled Ecologies. This is a book that she published last year. I think many of you were also at the opening book talk. And so Sonora came to me about 4 years ago and said, how do we ensure that the community gets this information? It's theirs. And so we've been creatively thinking back and forth for the last 4 years. 2025 seemed really far away, and now that it's here, it seems not so far away, right? But so we've been thinking about different ways that we can engage the community about this history that's ours. And so we've come up with a series of events. We currently have a rotating history exhibit going to about 9 different branches of the Pima County Public Library all across Pima County that shares this history in both English and Spanish. That's one way to engage. We have artist Alex Jimenez here, who, want to raise your hand, Alex? Who is partnering with us to make a tile mural, a permanent tile mural on the back of her In Memory Of mural, located at Mission Manor Park, which was dedicated to people lost to COVID. Alex always intended to have the backside be a memorial to people impacted by or died because of TCE. And so we're creating another opportunity for the community to come together to do that. The next opportunity to make a little tile out of clay is this Saturday at Quincy Douglas Library at 10 a.m. So I invite you all to look there. Our website is lostucson.com/TCE. I'll give you more information about that later. But that is essentially what this is. So we are now opening this up to the community. Alex requested a panel. She's like, I want to go a little bit deeper, which I thought was really brilliant, right? We're talking about water, we're talking about the aquifer. Let's let the water go deep, let's go deep. And so this panel was put together with a lot of love and intention. I am a 5th generation Tucsonense. It's really hard to tell me something about my hometown and to get me to believe it. But these people are some of those people, right? These are the people that I have seen showing up for decades. These are the people that are doing really amazing work in our communities and that I trust. And so I wanted us to just come up here and have a little discussion about water in the desert. And so that's what we're gonna be doing, and I thank you all for being here to witness this. All right, so our first question for our panelists, and we're just gonna go person to person, we'll start over here with Eva, is can you please introduce yourself and share your connection to either TCE and or water in the desert?
Thank you. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna stand up because I don't see a lot of you because you're in the back there. So I'll go ahead and stand up so you can see me a little bit better. My name is Eva Vasquez. My grandmother was born in Tucson in 1908. We became a state in 1912. So she was here before we were even, Tucson or Arizona. Unfortunately, I lived in the South Side all my life, and as such, without my mom knowing, she gave me water since I was an infant, since I was first born, that had a lot of TCE in it. We didn't know at the time that our groundwater was, contaminated with the TCE, and of course later on with other chemicals that were also in our groundwater, and then in our homes, in our sinks, in our gardens, in our showers, everywhere else. So many of us that are my age or older or younger, have been affected by the contamination. We, many of us have different types of illnesses, as you heard, all kinds of clusters of cancers, but also other things, such as lupus. Lupus is a big thing that we have on the South Side. My sister has lupus. My mother has skin lupus. She washed my dad's overalls. My dad worked over there at the hangars. And so he had the TCE on him, brought it home. She didn't wash our clothes with it because they had oils and grease stains on it. But she did wash it in her washing machine. And then later on, wash our clothes in her washing machine. She has skin lupus. I have Sjogren. Sjogren is a cousin of lupus. And so you'll see me drinking water quite often, because one of the things about Sjogren is that it gives you dry mouth. That's just one of the symptoms. And so, you never see me without this. A lot of people that know me, they go, "There's your bottle," because they always know this is my water bottle. I've had it for a couple of years, but I know. Anyways, so unfortunately, a lot of my friends, my colleagues, students, and classmates also became ill. And me and Jaramillo, he's slightly older than me, but a lot of our friends are no longer with us. A lot of the people that we did a lot of things with, we did all kinds of things with sports because we thought that's going to keep us healthy, right? You're out there in the parks and running around. Unfortunately, a lot of our classmates that did these sports with us are no longer with us because what we did, like most people, most kids in the parks, you go to drink water from the water fountain. So then we have our classmates dying in their early 20s when they should not have been dying in their early 20s. There was one that was one of my best friends. I always thought I'd be in a rocking chair with her at the end, talking about things, talking about the past, talking about stories. But unfortunately, she's gone. Sorry. Anyways, this is something that has affected our community quite a bit. And it's something that the reason we are here, the reason we're constantly in these things, in these meetings, instead of at home, is because we want to make sure that a couple of things happen. One of them is that people don't forget. We can't let people forget and think that this is already okay. It's not okay. We now have all kinds of other things. Dioxin is another chemical that's not now in our water that came from these areas, these manufacturing places. We have the PFAS. And the PFAS have really, really done a lot, to our communities, not just in the TCE area contamination, but throughout Arizona. And we need to make sure that people know that it's not just the people on the south side. They think, oh, just the people on the south side got affected. No, we have people coming from all over the city to work at Davis Mountain, to work at the Air National Guard, to work at the airport, to work at what was then Hughes and now Raytheon and Burr Brown and all these industries that use this stuff. And then they would go back over to their houses at the foothills Their houses on Houghton, their houses over here on the north side. And those people were also in our communities drinking the water. And many of them have gotten sick, many of them have died, or have, had their lives compromised because of what happened. So we can't just think this is a South Side issue. When they finally cleaned our water, they felt they cleaned our water, right? So we started drinking water from Colorado, the Colorado water, the tap water. We started drinking that water. They cleaned our water and sent it to other places. Downtown, all this area here, got our water from the south side. And yes, the TCE plants were working pretty well, but later on they found out about the dioxide and the PFAS, which they hadn't been cleaning. So all that stuff, downtown, all the way up north, by Marana, all the way over there by the base, that water was distributed all over the place. So, a lot of people think it's just a south side issue. It's not a south side issue. This is an issue that we need to know is an issue that is all of Tucson. And we can't forget it. We gotta keep working at it. There's some things that we are asking for all the time. Every time we're at meetings, we're asking for blood tests, and I'll let Jaramillo talk more about that. But we're constantly asking for people to please not forget it, to continue to fight for us. I see Ruben Reyes here. Congressman Grijalva did so much for us when it comes to this issue because he was affected. He's a Sunnyside grad. He went to schools there. His family went to schools there. His wife Mona went to school there, and they've lost families, lives. But what I think was one of the biggest things that Congressman Grijalva did was he pushed a law that said this isn't just an environmental issue, a social justice issue. Yes, it is, but it's also a civil rights issue. This is a civil rights issue because of the place that they're using these chemicals, and the people that live in the area, the marginalized people that live in the area, are the ones that are being poisoned the most. And this is not just environmental, it is important. Not just social justice, it is important. This is a civil rights issue, and Congressman Grijalva, was able to make other people throughout the country know this and have this become law. And I'll let Jaramillo speak now. There's just so much that we can go. Jaramillo can talk the whole night, so I'll stop right there and I'll talk some more in a little bit. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I'm Roberto Bobby Jaramillo. I've lived in that Southside area since 1959, so pretty much practically all my life. What I'd like to do is actually acknowledge some of the folks that were the spokesperson back in the heyday, 45 years ago, was Agustin, Yolanda Herrera's dad, Mr. and Mrs. Herrera's, the Grijalva family, Barbara Montes, Venezuela, which she was affected, Melinda Burnell, and the list goes on. I highly encourage you to read the Jane K articles. She got it right on. And I believe she's still with us. She'll maybe go visit, yeah. But those are the folks that I want to acknowledge. That's why we're here, because of them. Mr. Grijalva, Congressman Grijalva, fought a good fight for us. Remember the bill that they passed in, Mr. McCutcheon, Congressman McCutcheon as well. Neither one of them are with us anymore, okay? So some folks have been affected one way or the other. Myself, I grew up in the South Side. I went to Liberty Elementary School, Sunset Junior High, and Sunset High School. We didn't know what was going on with our water back then. As she mentioned, myself being an athlete in the 775 area, Little League, elementary school, let's face it, we didn't drink water from the water fountains. We found a water sprinkler and started sucking. Why? And why? Because coaches wouldn't allow you to drink water back then. It wasn't the cool thing to do. Okay? So you'd have to find water sources somewhere. We swam in that water. The YMCA. Another individual I'd like to give, Lorraine Lee. She was a big advocate as well. Okay, she was the board president of the health department back then. Her and Dr. Olivas, Dr. Golan, they're the ones that initiated the second epidemiology study that was done, because the folks that had done the first one in '87 felt that it was inconclusive. And I still feel that the last one was inconclusive as well. But those are the types of people that fought the fight hard. Lorraine is no longer with us anymore. You know, we swam at Mission Manor Park, Mission Manor Pool. That pool is not functional anymore. The pool at the YMCA, that's where Al Pueblo Center is now, is long gone. And we, you know, let's face it, Ms. Dong saying, our moms cook with that water. You go to elementary schools, the cafeteria ladies not only cook with it, but they wash dishes with it, they were handling it. Same thing goes to high school. I feel it has become generational. Okay, all the health effects of the community has suffered has become generational. Why? Because it didn't start yesterday. They didn't notice it maybe 40 years down the road. So it's been with us for at least 80 years. Okay, back into the late 40s when they were getting aircraft ready for the Korean War. That's where it started with 3 hangars on the south side. And that's where it actually started, off the Reales Road where the casino's at. Down Herman's Road, where Raytheon or Hughes now, Raytheon, the Air National Guard. And you know, I'm a retiree from the Air Guard, spent 30 plus years there. The airport as well. Burr Brown, Texas Instruments, Westcap. My mother worked at Westcap. She ended up dying about 20 years ago from pancreatic cancer. Why? Because she was working with the chemicals as well. Firefighters out at the airport as well. They can acknowledge and they'll tell you what they were burning out there because they used to go collect all the chemicals from all the industries and put them in a pit and light it up. And as kids, we used to see that black plume. If you grew up in the south, the plume at the Air Guard or at the airport, and the one at Davis Spawn as well, because they had the same issue. And if you go to any military base, that's what they were doing. And let's face it, firefighters have practice about fire. And I don't put the blame on them. Why? Because the chemicals supposedly, the producers of the product said it was safe to utilize, not knowing, and the firefighter friends of mine, not knowing what the cause and effect would be. I often say that Tucson, Southside Tucson is Camp Lejeune of Arizona. And I don't know if you've heard of Camp Lejeune, South Carolina Marine Corps base in South Carolina, which had the same issues that we're having here. Okay, and there's a public, and they said there was a lawsuit that was done back and settled in the 90s, mid 90s or so. Okay, but they settled without admitting guilt. Okay, for whatever reason. To this day, I think it was just a band-aid to kind of hush the people. They got their money and they were happy. And it's sad because a lot of those were our classmates, our colleagues, our teachers. Okay, folks out of Raytheon or at Hughes at the Guard, they didn't live there, but they worked there and took the chemicals with them to them home. So there's a list that is a publication that was put out by Veterans Affairs on Camp Lejeune, and a lot of illnesses that are listed in page 24 are a lot of the illnesses the ladies had as well. The gals that I grew up with, my sisters, my neighbors, my classmates, whether it's breast cancer, thyroid cancer, uterine cancer, and the list goes on. So they can't tell us that it didn't happen, didn't affect, there's no cause and effect. Well, I beg to differ. And that's what, I'm a big advocate to see if we can get some blood testing up for our community. It's gone on deaf ears for a lot of people. But I just want to say thank you for some of you folks that are in the audience that are involved. Ms. Herrera, she's the president of the Unified Community Advisory Board. She's done a good job as well. Again, so we go back, I'm not gonna say, a few years, okay? So this is something that's been going on for generations. It becomes generational, and health issues have become generational. Okay, our generation, we're actually the second or third generation, but our kids and our grandkids are being affected as well. The firefighting folk is a whole different ballgame. The one for dioxin is a different ballgame. I call them the new beast on the block, which is the firefighting folk. And I mentioned it last week at the UCAB meeting. I feel, they said, well, there's no even any health issues. Well, show us the data that the folks in our community have been affected. And show us, since when has DOD, Department of Defense, become part of home health services, right? They became the experts now. Well, the experts are the folks that live in the community, the ones that have been affected. And a lot of them don't speak up for whatever reason. A lot of our classmates and neighbors, they don't speak up because they're no longer with us. So we have to carry the word out and speak for the ones that are no longer with us. Thank you.
We're just introducing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Bettis, she, her. Yeah, I am here to represent the Tucson Birthplace Open Space Coalition. We organize at the base of Tucson, a mountain, to protect 27 acres from development. And yeah, we've had some amazing progress this last year. We successfully had Rio Nuevo, who manages the board that manages the land, adopt a 10-year plan that protects the space as open space. We regularly have walk and talks. We have ceremony and gatherings there. We've informed the community through multiple avenues, and we kind of changed the narrative. We challenged the narrative around that space because for a brief period of its long history, it was a landfill. So we are very familiar with the conversations around contamination and water and community expertise and just all the complications that come with that. Yeah, I want to share more about our story, but I want to continue to introduce myself. So I think a really important part of what we do and what I hear us talking about is memory. So I want to honor the memory of my elders. So Paulina, Ignacio, Rosa, Jose, Evangelina, Pedro, and Rosa. Those are my great-grandparents, my grandparents, and my parents. They're from Michoacan, Sonora, they're Yaqui, Purepecha, Spanish. And then I'm also a mother to Azul, who was born here in Tucson. Yeah, I have lots of connections to water. I actually learned about the TCE contamination when I was studying under Dr. Monica Ramirez at the University of Arizona. She taught classes on environmental justice. I also learned about social justice from Tucson High back in the day of ethnic studies, Mexican American studies. So we talk about water in the desert as a precious resource, and I just want to close and say, water is life. Water is life. Water is life.
Testing, okay, you can hear me. I'm gonna stretch my legs a little. So my name is Nellie Jo David, and I'm here because of my connections to water in the desert. On my mom's side is mostly the side that's lived here in this area for generations. Mostly the Ajo area, but actually all over. My dad's white from Minnesota, and then obviously for that Europe, ancestors. But my mom, on my mom's side, my grandfather is Octum, and his relatives have been here since, for a pretty long time. Pretty long, goes way back. And my nana is mestizo, so her relatives also go back, way back. She has relatives over in New Mexico, California, a lot over here, Magdalena. Her dad is from here and her mom is from here. And so my nana has, when I think about water in the desert, the first thing that comes to my mind is my nana. She grew up in Scottsdale. She grew up in the ranchos in Scottsdale, went to the little red schoolhouse there. And she talks about when everything in that area, in Phoenix of all places, used to be lush with, groves of orange trees and rose bushes and just so much green and beautiful life. And she tells me this, and I'm like, what are you talking about, Mama? The Phoenix is a kind of an ugly desert, I don't want to diss it or anything, but, it's not what it's not the same as what you're talking about. And then, I also think about my grandfather, my tata, who worked in the Ajo mines. And that's where I feel a lot of connection to what you're talking about here, because, you go to the mine in Ajo and you see a big puddle of water right in the middle of it. And that water, has contaminated the aquifer. We also have high cancer rates. And even talking about the high cancer rates, you have a huge blowback in our town of like, hey, you can't talk about this. The mine, what are you talking about? They gave us everything. And so when we try to talk about the contamination in the water and the harms that were done, a lot of times there's this huge pushback. And another thing I think about when we talk about water in the desert is the bombing range that's close by. I'm a member of the Hikuan district of the Contamination, and within the Hikuan district, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a big issue with jet fuel, just being dumped in the Hikuan district and killing a big number of saguaro cactuses there. And so folks were, the water was contaminated, people were impacted, and yet this was largely silenced and not talked about. And there's still things that you're like, what? This really happened? So much of our history and our relations to the landscape, and when there used to be cleaner water, a lot of that transitional time, the history of that has been heavily suppressed. I didn't learn about it in my regular schooling. I really had to, be taught from my elders and really listen and seek out some of the knowledge that I've acquired. And I would say the last little connection to water in the desert was our recent fight against the border wall. Trump's border wall. It came across Hiachigawam territory, pumped a large amount of water from the ground, messed with our sacred spring, Quito Quito, and we witnessed the desecration. And then, we all know about the horrors of prevention to deterrence. And so there's, my hometown, Ajo, is in the corridor of prevention to deterrence. So, very solidarity, with water is, water really is life in so many ways. And it's unfortunate that it's, not only contaminated in this manner and ignored when this happens, but it also, becomes weaponized, and especially when it comes to the most marginalized people of color. And so I'm really thankful to be invited on this panel and bear witness and just listen to these stories, because I think they're really important and also serve as inspiration to keep speaking about what we've experienced and the injustices that have happened here in our communities.
Okay, can you hear us? Cool, all right, here's Desiree.
Hello everyone, can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Sweet, all right. My name is Desiree Salceda. I use they, them pronouns. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm sick, and I don't want to get anybody else sick, so I'm at home. And I just want to say thank you to Alisha for inviting me to be on this panel, for inviting FMD to be on this panel, and for still finding a way to include me in this conversation, even though I'm not feeling very well today. So a little bit about me. I work with Flowers and Bullets Collective here in Tucson, which is a grassroots, indigenous-led and focused green space and farm in the Barrio Centro neighborhood. And much of our work is about empowering our neighborhood. So we do a lot of work within the community. Everything we do is by and for the community first. I am originally from Phoenix, but I've spent much of my life going back and forth between like the urban environment of the West Valley to rural southern Arizona, namely Sierra Vista, where my grandparents lived, and Douglas, where my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents lived once they came across the border from Sonora. My family is originally from Rioyaqui, Sonora, And that is where much of my relationship to water comes from. Water in the desert is in my blood. I am a desert person. My people have lived in the Sonoran Desert for millennia. And my identity is deeply and inextricably tied to water in our desert, especially our riparian systems, which are increasingly compromised because of colonization. There's not a lot of communication between the US and Mexico in terms of like what is going on with Rio Yaqui, but our river is deeply, deeply compromised by damming and more recently a pipeline being built in our river. But something I'm really proud of is that our people have also been really successful in resisting this pipeline and finding alternative pathways to accessing water. Because damming decides who gets to access water and when, and it generally does not tend to be indigenous people. And then with pipelines famously contaminate our water, and the first people to feel that harm is indigenous people. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. Some of the work that we do with F&B is also rainwater harvesting and learning how to build this relationship with this fifth season that we have in the Sonoran Desert, which is monsoon season, and building this relationship with our rainwater. And we not only harvest rainwater on our own farm, but we teach our community how to build this infrastructure for themselves, how to harvest the water both together, and empower people to do it on their own. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you guys. And I'm gonna actually share my connection with water, specifically TCE. So like I said, I've been talking with Sonora about this since about 2021. And yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of my Nana passing. And it's just, when I think of my family, when I think of my grandfather, I think of him watering the dirt or watering the plants. And my moms and my tias and tios always say, whenever we go over to grandma's house, she'd be watering the dirt so that we wouldn't create a bunch of dust. And so, to think that there was a time that people did that here without feeling guilty about it. I could never do that today. I'd never water the dirt. But in terms of this, so about a month after my Nana passed, my tia called me and she said, I found Dad's lawsuit paperwork. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And apparently my grandfather was part of one of the unsuccessful lawsuits. And so in doing this work, right, being from here but not really being connected to TCE, I was like, well, I think I can make this connection for myself. But when I found that out, it just kind of made sense. The silences that happen in our family around disability, around illness, around not being successful in litigation, those generate. And so the fact that my grandfather, who I was very, very close with, I didn't know he was impacted by TCE and had scleroderma as a result of it. And so I think that for me, as an educator, as somebody who knows that water is life, is our most valuable resource, I'm a little desert kid, this panel is all that much more important to keep the story alive because it's gonna happen again and again. And the privileges that I have now are to speak about it. And so, again, in keeping this conversation going, all of our panelists have mentioned the knowledge within community, right? We hold a tremendous amount of knowledge. And unfortunately, because of power in our society, we often don't listen to our gut, right? And so my next question for this whole panel is based on all of your knowledge and all of your experiences, what are the biggest threats to the environment and life in the Sonoran Desert? Anybody can start.
I just want to say it's forgetting your history, not speaking with your elders, and forgetting your stories. I think, like you said, we have so much knowledge, so much expertise within our communities, and when we believe others that we don't, and we don't look to each other for that expertise and that knowledge, and we forget, that is a huge threat. That loss of indigenous knowledge, the loss of biodiversity, the loss of traditional and indigenous languages, that is a huge threat. And you know, it's kind of a bigger existential threat, right? I can talk about some of the more immediate threats that we see, like development, mining, you know, big industries, but ultimately what those that movement is doing is telling us to forget. And I think something that TBOS did and has done is to tell stories, to remember, to look at archives and history of the place. You know, something that we heard a lot when we started organizing was, you know, you're trying to do something impossible. You know, it's a landfill, it's contaminated, it needs to be remediated, people have been trying to protect this space for decades. It's impossible, you know, you should just move on, it's not worth your time. And then we showed them otherwise because we kept getting together in place and we kept telling stories and kind of doing some investigating because there was also a lot of rumors about the landfill. And a lot of pain. I mean, there was really generational trauma. People, you know, when it was a landfill or pits, people falling in the pits and dying or drowning in the water that would gather in those pits. People having to deal with the smell of an unregulated landfill in their barrios in that time. And, you know, this work is really complex. But something that the land can do and the thing that we can do together in community is remember and hold that complexity. We can hold the harm, the very real harm that happened to communities, and we can hold the history. I mean, there's over 4,000 years since time immemorial. That is an ancestral village of the Valdosta people. You know, there are families in the Rock now who have ties, lineage that goes back to that place. So we can do both. We can hold that memory as a sacred place, as a place of ancestors where stories and lives, where there's life right in between that mountain and the water and the river, and that time that caused so much harm in the barrios. And so I think, you know, the biggest threat is to forget and to look to other places for knowledge instead of looking to your neighbor and your elders.
That was great. Can you hear me? No? No? Yeah. There we go. Okay. That was great. I mean, it's perfect, you know, what you're saying is making sure that we always remember, you know, and to listen to others and their histories. And that way, you know, they say that history will repeat itself if you don't pay attention to it and listen to others is what happened. So I really appreciate your words. Those are great words. One other thing, though, that I feel that we need to be very careful about, and it's coming in as a big threat to us in this desert, is the loss of the water. You know, we're getting some water right now from the Colorado, you know, and through CAP, but they're starting to shut down how much they're sending to us. At the same time, we're having a lot of waters that we have now that are contaminated. So some of those other things and other things that are happening to our water, of course, no rain. You know, we're not having the rain come to replenish. All of those things that are happening are really going to impact, or have started already, to impact our aquifers. And I think that's something that we really need to be, you know, concerned about. Before, there was like thousands of saguaros, beautiful green flowers, you know, and we didn't have to worry about them because nature took care of it. The aquifer took care of it. But now, if we don't water our aloe veras, they dry out. That didn't happen in the past. When I was growing up, you didn't have to water your aloe veras. You know, they now and then you might sprinkle a little bit, But most of the time, you didn't have to water them because there was enough water. Yes, we did water the dirt. I remember my mom and dad always watering the dirt. It smelled very good, and sometimes when you did that, you found coins. That was always one of my favorites. I think one time when my uncle was here, he used to put coins on purpose, and he would water and have us get all excited about finding the dimes and the quarters. But the water is, I think, something that we can't forget. We're talking about it. It's something that is contaminated, that has hurt us, that has hurt our families, that has stopped us from being, generations of long lives. My family, I come from generations of people that are in their 90s and 100s. They say, oh wow, you got, a good lineage, you got great. I said, I used to, until I drank this water. Now, everybody's dying. My aunts, who drank it, maybe they were already teenagers when they started drinking it, but they're already past in their 50s and 60s. They're no longer living to their 90s and 100s. And so we need to also be aware that this is something that has hit us in the past in generations, but it's still hitting us, and we need to start taking care of our water. We need to start thinking about the future. What are we gonna do when Colorado no longer wants us, or can? Because we're not the only ones in drought. They're also not having as much water as they used to. So we need to start thinking about and planning of what are we gonna do. One of the things, of course, is to stop contaminating the ground. We need to stop contaminating our waters. But we also need to plan and do and think about other things that we can do. There's all kinds of scientific things that are really neat right now that I've been hearing about as far as getting water out of the air. Fantastic things that I've seen happening. We need to keep pushing that. We need to keep putting money into that, not take away grants that are trying to come and help our scientists, with the studies, but give more money to those things, give more grants to those things, so that we can do what we need to do to protect our water, because it's getting less and less, and what we do have, a lot of it is contaminated. So that's, I think, one of the things that we need to do.
One of the threats I feel we have is the lack of clean water.
There, you just hold it.
Hold it closer. Okay, I believe one of the biggest threats that we have is not having access to clean water. But I do want to give kudos to the folks, the polluters, for taking care of the environmental issue. They're doing their due diligence of trying to get it cleaned up. Okay, the Raytheon folks, the airport, the Air National Guard. Kudos to Tucson Mayor Council, Mayor Romero, for what their team is doing. Mayor and Council are ahead of the ballgame actually, as far as the cleanup goes, as well as Tucson Water. A lot of people have the misconception that we're drinking polluted water right now. Well, because of the efforts of what Mayor and Council have done and taken initiative to clean the water, so it can be consumable one of these days. But we're actually not consuming any of the polluted water right now. But that's not to say that eventually we'll have to, like Ms. Dong says, it depends on what tier we are with the Colorado River, okay? And if and when they're gonna shut us off. Okay, it's gonna happen eventually. Their foresight of banking water up in Abra Valley, so we should have at least water for at least another 25 to 30 years from what we're told. Okay, so what's gonna happen after that? What are future generations gonna do? Where are we gonna get our clean but safe drinking water? Okay, accessible drinking water. That water that's in the aquifer is what's gonna have to be utilized. And what they're doing now to clean it up is leaps and bounds of what they used to do in the past. When the folks that were in government officials were actually denying that our water was contaminated. 40 years ago. Okay, until the environmental groups sprout up in the neighborhoods. But that's the biggest fear I have, is that future generations having access to clean, safe drinking water. Thank you.
when you first talked about this question, my mind was just like, I almost panicked with like, oh my gosh, there's so much attacking our water right now. And you're saying loss of water. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's the biggest problem is the loss of the water. And there's so many reasons for it. You know, there's overuse, there's mining, there's militarization. You know, there's all these folks moving, you know, here from other places, and you know, and big golf courses and man-made lakes, you know, and all kinds of reasons why we're losing our water. But I'm worried. I think about this water loss every day. One of the proposals that I'm scared of right now, because there's, pretty much all of it impacts the land in every geographical area, and it's across the border. It's on, both sides of the border. And so I'm worried about, the proposal in Sonora with, IDE Technologies. Of course, they didn't get the contract. The governor of Sonora opposed it. But the problem is still there. They're still acquiring the land and playing this waiting game of, okay, we're going to wait until the problem gets really, really bad, and then we're going to repropose. These desalination plants that are really bad for the ecosystem would, really contaminate the Sea of Cortez. I like to call it the Sea of Autumn. But we took our with the Border Studies program in our own college, and we take our students to Cerro in Puerto Penasco, and so we learn about the delicate ecosystem and just how many extinct fish and how important it is, all the flora and the fauna, and how desalination would actually be pumping more salt and make the ocean salt or the sea saltier and kill the fish. And so that's really scary. Pretty worried about the sea and ocean, as well as the drought happening here. And to make things worse, with the video proposals, they're using "water is life" as a slogan. Pretty much, blasphemy. And they want to pump this water, in big, large amounts through the area that we just fought, where the border wall. They put the border wall through the, right by Quito, and pump it all the way to Phoenix and all these other areas. And so this is not, something to scare you. This is something real that's, IDE Technologies have gotten contracts in California. So these plants already exist, and it looks likely, that we're gonna face a lot more problems with water ahead. So I worry about that, and I worry about the, continuation of, expansion of houses out into the desert, out into like what I thought were protected areas, but they don't seem to be protected, as encroachment keeps kind of going out. But there's just so many issues, and so I'm really thankful to be among other folks that are putting their minds together and really thinking about these issues, because it's one of the most crucial, important issues that we're facing. And what will our future generations be without clean water? We won't have them. We need clean water in order to exist as communities. And so this is pretty much the forefront issue that we have to figure out a solution for.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to say that anyone hasn't already said, because to me, the biggest threat to life in the Sonoran Desert, and just in general, is this very industrial lifeway that we've become so dependent on. We truly have forgotten how to be with the land, we've forgotten how to be with the water, and as a consequence, our land is dying and our water is running out. I think Phoenix is a really good example of this, because Maricopa County is slated to become uninhabitable within our lifetime. which is a big deal. And how are we responding to it? All these big tech companies are coming in, and all these transplants are moving to Phoenix and demanding expansion, with very little thought as to how this is going to affect anything in the long term. And all of this tech requires so much water. We have AI that people are just increasingly using every day that dumps so much water. And like, what do we do? I think about this all the time, and I think about, like, also COVID is a really good example of like how fragile our systems are. We saw for several years how fragile our systems are. We saw how the government had straight up snuck out of that. We saw how fragile corporations are. This lifeway is what we are so reliant on, and it can fall apart like that. But I also think that it showed how effective mutual aid is, and mutual aid networks are and can be. And that's kind of like, that's where I go, and like, because what do we do is the question of the hour, right? Because I think more and more people are increasingly seeing, and also the effects of climate catastrophe. Climate collapse isn't just on the horizon, it's here. And it's just going to get closer and closer and closer until it's happening to us. Along with like militarization on the border and more surveillance technology, it's killing our ecosystem, it's killing the animals, it's killing people. Our desert is so fragile right now. And so like that, all I keep going to is like, all we really have is each other in these times. Like, how do we make our support systems more resilient?
I wanted to respond to a couple things. When I saw this question, like, what's the biggest threat to water? The first thing that came to mind was AI. I was like, it uses so much water, and it's moving so fast, and and AI, is a brilliant piece of technology, but it's also, it does not live in our world. It lives in its own world that we created for it. And the other thing I wanted to respond to was this slogan, water is life. The reason why I chose to say it again here, because I have seen it, people taking it and using it without embodying it, truly, like knowing what that phrase means. Like, yes, we understand you need water to live, to drink, to grow plants. But I think, something that TBOS does is we organize with the river, and some parts of the river are dry, and you don't see the water there, but I think we're always acknowledging and collaborating with the water that's there underground. And we, kind of equate a lot of the success that we've seen in our work with what is happening with the water. There's so many opportunities and things that came together just at the same time, like the base of Tucson, the aquifer there, that pushes all the water up to create life, to hold that ancestral village. It's the same thing that happened with TBOS. Like, so many different streams came in and came together, and we won. We got something, we made progress, we got what we wanted, at least for the short term, and we did something that people thought was impossible. So I think continuing, yes, like holding that fear and that loss of that water, it's real, and also continuing to like collaborate with the water and do not let go of that water is life. Like, don't let other people take it. Yeah.
One of the things as far as taking water is the agriculture. And the mass of amounts of alfalfa fields that we have. Okay? For a lot of times, we don't get to keep the alfalfa. It goes to Saudi Arabia. Okay? And that should be a big concern of ours, is why, and practically no cost, right? All the profits go to the Middle East. But that should be a big concern. How about the developers? You know, they're having to guarantee 100 years of water before they put up a subdivision, right? Are we even gonna have 100 years of water left in our aquifer after the Colorado River sucked dry? So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah.
No, I'll wait for the next question.
All right, well, thank you, panelists, for responding to this question. I just want to kind of, bring us back together. What I heard is militarization, economy, neocolonization, border policy, transplants, not understanding our climate here, our desert, our environment, forgetting where we come from, and deregulation, right? I think these are all things that have a new meaning since January 20th. And I encourage us to keep talking about it. And so some of you got to this, but this question actually is from Emily Moreau, who is the head or one of the heads of Earth Day for the Hood, which is happening this weekend, this Sunday. Woo-hoo! Do we have reps here? Yeah. What's up? So Earth Day for the Hood is happening this Sunday from 2 to 6 p.m. at 2334 South 4th Avenue. So you can come to me for more information after. But what Emily asks, and this is for all of our panelists, what do you recommend as the next step let me start this over. What do you recommend as the next steps in environmental justice work, especially regarding the state of the U.S. government?
Hello?
Yeah.
Put ourselves in bulldozers?
Yeah. That's what Nelly did.
Just a thought.
You might want to explain for the folks in the back.
Oh, yeah, myself and Amber Theo were arrested for that. For blocking the U.S.-Mexico border wall. And this particular, I'm thinking of the mining out in the Santa Ritas, which is, really decimating, sacred area and contaminating, all that runoff, all those chemicals, that's gonna run right into, Santa Cruz. And also, all of the runoffs, it's really, really, really bad. And I'm terrified, because it was already bad and now it's gonna get worse. So, I don't know what to do, but I would really want to talk about it because I think we should be urgently doing something.
Okay, I think I learned how to turn this on. I think, one of the things that makes me happy is to see so many young people here. Because you guys, I'm depending on you for my grandchildren, for my great-grandchildren. The things that you guys do and you start thinking about and pushing for, getting arrested for, those are the things that I think we need to continue to do. And, some of us are having a hard time rolling out of that car. And we can't jump out like we used to. but there's so many young faces here, and that makes me hopeful. That makes me hopeful because I know you guys will be here pushing these issues. Look at here, I'm so glad that we're talking about this and we're discussing what are some of the things that are happening, have happened in the past, but what can we do for the future? Take care of our water. Watch what happens to our water. Watch what's going on with Saudi Arabia. Not let it happen again. We've already put some steps in to stop it. We gotta make sure it does not happen again. So we gotta keep educating ourselves, right? You're here to educate yourselves, and I'm glad and thankful that you're here to educate yourselves. And we gotta continue to do that. If we had known about Saudi Arabia 10 years ago, would we have continued to let it happen? I don't think so. We would have fought it more. And not until we found out, then we started fighting for it. So we've got to make sure that we don't take 10 years to find out something's going on. We gotta do it now. We now know how much it takes for the plants that are now going up all over, especially in Phoenix area, Buckeye area. We know how much water they're going to take. And yet, because of jobs, we're allowing it to happen. We can't do that. We cannot do that just because of jobs. We have to take care of both at the same time. We have to take care of the economy, make sure people are working, but at the same time, make sure that they have a place that is safe for them and their families and to raise their children. We can't just continue, when we have mines come up, we understand, especially places like, some of our mining counties that are a little further out, but even around here, we understand that it's helps us to have jobs. But we cannot just think about that and not think about how can we make things safer for everybody. What are we doing when we're saying, go ahead and put as many mines as you want in the Santa Ritas? What are we doing? We gotta stop and think about that. So, my thing is, that I want to end here is, please continue to educate yourselves. Please continue to listen and to read about things that are going on. And please, I'll say something. One of the ways that you can continue to educate yourselves is go to some of those meetings that are out there. I'm glad you're here. There's other meetings like UCAP that meets quarterly. They just met and they put out some really good things. They put out all kinds of maps, and the maps tell you where the plumes are, how things are going with these plumes, where we're cleaning up and where we still need to clean up. And you can get those when you go to these meetings. I brought a few that were left over from the last one, so if you want to, you can get some of those maps that are there from the last ones. I also brought this thing. They give you one of these every time you go to that UCAB meeting, quarterly. And this thing has so much information that you can use as you're educating yourself. It tells you things like, I'm not going to go through all of it, just a couple of things. The average TCE concentration, where is it at with raw water, and treated with RMS? And they'll explain that to you. So, those of you that take one of these books, it's going to be very technical. But if you go to these meetings, you understand what it's about, because they'll explain it. And so it's really neat. They tell you what they've done. One of the things that we did that Jaramillo put together was we went to the water treatment plant and got to actually be in there. There was an area we couldn't go to because they're building a new thing for the PFAS, but you get to see most of it. And we gave people also, with Jaramillo's help, a tour of the different wells that are out there. And he's got a paper out here. If you want to go to one of those tours, put your name and phone number on there, and he'll give you a call. We don't have dates yet because we got to find out when everybody can go. Not all of you at the same time, but so different dates will happen as we take different people. So please make sure that you put your information over there. So if you want one of these books, there's quite a few of them out there. Also, you can get these things online. They have these things online. If you can't go to the meeting, that's okay because you can do it virtually. I had another meeting I had to go to before this one. So as I finished the other one, I just got onto the virtual, and I listened to it all the way until I got to hear all the questions and everything that was being said. But people come and they talk to you about, they give you statements about what they're doing. And some of the people, let me just tell you, just real quick, this is the last thing. Some of the people that will be there, the agenda, you're going to get to hear from the EPA. You're going to hear from AEQ, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. You're going to be able to hear from Tucson Water, the Tucson Airport property, Air Force Plant 44, and the Air National Guard, among others. So you get to hear from these people. They'll give you, they'll tell you exactly what these plumes are meaning. They'll tell you exactly how much TCE they've pulled out, how much dioxin they pulled out, and where it's going. So give it a lot of information. Please keep getting educated. For the sake of my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. One of the things that we would like to see be done is the producer of the product pays for the cleanup. You know, let's face it, they probably have the best chemists in the world. And they knew what they were producing. And there's former scientists that used to work for DuPont, 3M, Claymore, and those companies that'll attest to that. They wouldn't do it back then, 70 years ago, but they're speaking up now. And those are the folks that we have to maybe invite to a meeting. But you know, why should the taxpayers or the city or even these fellas here have to pay for the cleanup? How about the health issues the community's having? Why aren't they stepping up? You know, I know there's lobbyists up at the big house lobbying for their companies, but why aren't they lobbying for the health of our community members, right? We've seen the cause and the effect it has had to our family members, our classmates, our neighbors, and the list goes on. It's really sad to go to a class reunion, especially our 50th, right? And some of you guys are barely 20 years old, but you should see the tables of the pictures of the folks that are no longer with us. It's really, truly sad to see that. And that's why we're here. We're speaking up for those individuals that are no longer with us. Whether it's a family member, a classmate, a neighbor, a co-worker, and the list goes on. Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is like, what do we do? You know, I do want to acknowledge that things are really hard right now. And there's so much instability and fear, so much fear. And my answer to this is land back. We have to give land back to the I think that is a hard solution to get to, really hard. But it's worth the effort. It is absolutely worth the effort, even if you don't see it in your lifetime, even though you don't know how you're gonna get there. I think that's something that TBOS, from the get-go, you know, you can look at our value statement, it's always been about land back. And we didn't know how we were gonna do it, but we knew if we held our values and continued to show up again and again in this place that we care so much about, that we would get there, and we are getting there. You know, that is really where we're going with this, and we're almost there, guys. I don't want to say too much about it, but we're getting there, you know, and even with all of this mess and fear that's happening, we're getting there, and I think we gotta be creative about it, and we gotta acknowledge our fear, we gotta be friends with our fear, and then we can't let it stop us. We gotta take care of each other. You gotta find your people, you know, and just organize around that value. If you wanna see a different world, envision it and just keep going for it. And keep getting together and having conversations and going for, we love walk and talks, you know, we walk the land and talk to each other. And there was no roadmap for what we've been doing, but we just kept showing up for each other. And right now, I think, you know, you can think of really big solutions at the federal level. And then we can see how easy that can all go away. So something that is not gonna go away is like the care and the love that we have for each other. No matter what, even if you locked me up, I would not stop loving my homies that I've been working with, you know? That's always gonna be there forever. And it's powerful stuff. And I see that with you all too. You loved your neighbors, your peers, your friends, your family. And I think that carries us through these really, really challenging times, and it allows us to imagine a better world for I have a baby right now, he's 1.5 years. He's just getting started. You know, I have no other choice. I need him to have a good world. I need it. I can't do anything else with my time besides build that better world. And so, and I'm gonna do that with hope, I'm gonna do that with my friends. I'm gonna do that with the land. And I'm just like, gonna say it again, land back.
Does?
So the question is like next steps, but I don't think that there's any way to like neatly lay out next steps. There's no way to neatly do anything in this climate. The word that keeps coming to my mind is mobilize.
Thank you.
This isn't like shade at anybody, but like it's so easy to say things like water is life, land back, and these things are very meaningful and very powerful, but we have to actually mobilize around them. And that can look a lot of different ways, and we have to use a variety of tactics to do so, to be able to build another world, to be able to world build together. And it can look like anything from like getting to know your neighbors better and sharing your food with your neighbors, to like physically putting yourself in between like a bulldozer and trees, like literally doing land defense stuff. And there's a huge gap there, and so many different things line up in that gap too. Like I was saying earlier, like I very, very, very firmly believe in mutual aid. I think it's kind of our only way out of this is like we can't rely on governments, we can't rely on the state because they don't have a stake in our well-being, they don't have a stake in our care. And we've seen that. I mean, what has brought us here? What has brought us water contamination? What has brought us soil contamination? What has brought us climate collapse? It's the state that is an arm of colonization, right? And so all we really have is each other to world build with. And it's solidarity. It's setting up bail funds for people who do get arrested and getting them out of jail so we can continue. It's like showing up to parks with your friends and feeding people with food that you made yourself, right? Like there's so many different ways that we can go about this. I know that like the current political climate is scary. It's terrifying. It's chilling to our movements, and it's killing them. And I understand why, especially for like younger generations who don't have very much experience with organizing. It can seem really scary to like, for example, there's folks who are doing land defense who are facing 75 years in prison right now, which I don't think will stick, but that's like the current reality. And I totally get that people don't want anything to do with that, and they want to just like not. They want to go back to their normal lives, but going back to our normal lives is what allows all of this harm and this catastrophe to continue. And so, like, if we are building resilient networks of care, if we're building resilient mutual aid support systems, then, like, that's the only hope that I have. That's how I think that we can build a better world, is just together. And saying this, it's going to be really, really messy. Like I said, there's no way to neatly lay out any of this. But it's okay to be messy. It's okay to fail. It's okay to mess up. If we're scared of messing up, then we're never going to do it. And this world that we're dreaming of is never going to be built because it's going to be a mess. And it's okay.
Thank you all. When you were speaking right now, it also reminded me, this shout out to Nora and this book, Disabled Ecologies. It really does bring together this notion of community care and environmental justice. And so the disability language, the disability knowledge that exists in this book, I think is also, right, I would call it crypt wisdom. I think it also belongs in all of our movements, right? Sometimes we can't show up. Sometimes I'm working from bed, but we're, any way that you can show up is still part of the movement. So I want to take this opportunity, right? So I was very intentional to make this an intergenerational conversation. And so this is just my last question for the panelists, and then we'll open it up to our audience. But my question is, what piece of information do you want other generations that you're not a part of to know? What's a piece of information? Could be about water, it could be about
Start a 401k when you're 25.
What I feel is, don't be afraid to speak up, okay? You know, I mean, what can they do with us? Right? You know, and I wish I would have found this out a long time ago. Because I've just been picking up for the last 10 years or so. Okay, but I should have started a long time ago, knowing what's going on in the community. And I kick myself in the butt for that. Because it's ongoing. Personally, I don't think it's gonna end for quite some time, especially with the new administration we have, what they're doing with the cuts with the EPA. Okay, it's education. For all you educators here, take it with you. Take some of these handouts with you to educate your students. The future generation is the one that's gonna be trying to take care of the mess that us older generations have left for them. Okay, because there is a mess when it comes to the pollution, not only here, but it's worldwide. Okay, and with all the cuts that are happening, where are they gonna get the funding? But they have their voice, right? You know, I want to give kudos to Ms. Herrera, Yolanda, for speaking about the nation, right? And then when Roger spoke up Wednesday, right? And he did a spiel that they did find PFAS contamination in the nation, and she put him on the spot. Are you going to take care of the cleanup, right? And that's the thing that we have to do, is put those people, hold them accountable, and have them speak up in a crowd, right? It's recorded, it's in the minutes, so they can deny it when we come back to it. So thank you for doing that, and it's really appreciated. That's what we have to continue doing, whether it's my generation or the generation that was prior to me, our parents, our grandparents, and they're the ones that started speaking up. Rosa Agustin, okay, she was a big advocate, okay. Lorraine Lee, she's no longer with us anymore. Her brother as well passed away. And they live right there by the Waynes where the Alcohol Center is right now. Their parents have a little grocery store there. So we have the stories to tell, but the stories have to continue to be generational and not forget the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Jaramillo keeps mentioning Lorraine Lee, and for those of you that are younger and didn't know her, she was a big advocate in the community in so many different ways, and whether it be things about Rasa studies or the environment or health, she was very, very strong advocate for all of us. Unfortunately, she got throat cancer and fought it quite a bit, you know, blamed it on the TCE. Unfortunately lost her battle, and so we no longer have her voice, but we have to be her voice. She's not here, she can't speak up anymore or fight this anymore, but you can. So we need to use our voices and make sure that we continue to speak up. And don't think that, that you won't be able to make a difference, because you can. The more we fight, the more that we're gonna be able to make things happen. I'm in a group called Environmental Justice Action Group, and we fought a plant over there in the Sunnyside District. This plant was using beryllium. And beryllium causes berylliosis. We have a brand new, incredible Board of Supervisor named Andres Cano. His grandmother passed away from berylliosis that she contracted at that plant. You know, and so we went and we fought it. People kept saying, oh, they're not doing anything. But we gave them the information that they needed to know, the community, the information they needed to know. We showed them what they did in Elmore, Ohio, with the same kind of big headlines about how they poisoned the community over there. And then what they do, they came over here and they didn't change anything. So they started to poison our community, and we fought them. So they had to then no longer do some of the things that they were doing, that were horrible things that they were doing, that were allowing beryllium to leak out into our community through their vent systems that they had, and their dryer systems and things like that. They were bringing in trucks that had holes in the beryllium So that was coming throughout our entire city. There was all kinds of things that they were doing, but we pointed it out to the powers that be. We made sure that we kept putting the pressure. And before you knew it, they had to make the changes. And it was just regular folk like me. I didn't have, any power. I didn't have, I wasn't a person that was a congressperson that have great power sometimes, and they're good when they use it well. I was just a regular person with other people that were regular people. Or some of them had, chemist brains, and so they would tell me what was going on so that I could fight the fight. But all of you, just get off that couch, turn off that TV, go to the next rally. Be there in the mornings, be there in the evenings, be there in the afternoons, those of you that are retired. And can be there in the afternoons and fight. Use your voice for people like Lorraine that can no longer use their voice. Thank you.
When I think about, any kind of advice I would offer, or any, generations that aren't mine, I think about kind of the hardest things. I think about like the mistakes. And I think of how things have gotten messy, I think of how some of those things have hurt movements. And I think about how, refusal to be accountable to ourselves has hurt ourselves. And so, I'm 41 years old. I haven't seen that much in my lifetime, but I've seen a lot. I've seen quite a bit. And, it really had, especially when the border wall was going down, what really hurt my heart was knowing so many incredible people. And nobody was talking to each other at the time. Everybody was mad. Everybody had interpersonal issues that, they hadn't dealt with. And so that was one of the hardest parts of everything, is just knowing what potential that we had, and that we couldn't reach that potential at the time that we needed most because we hadn't, come together or worked out our interpersonal issues. And so that was my biggest frustration on, what could have been, what could be, if we had some more accountability towards ourselves. And so that's one of my biggest, I tell the younger people, we have to think about, if we're lucky enough to make it to elders, we need to think about what kind of elders that we're going to be, and we need to think about how we'll help the future generations, and also understand it's not about us. It's about the future generations. That's something that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, especially when I was younger and I wanted to see it in my lifetime. I wanted to see the change now, which I don't think is a bad goal, to really want to see to want to see that change. But after a while, you have to realize, these problems, they're going to still exist. I might die and it could get worse, but still I'm going to fight. Still I'm going to fight, because this isn't just, about in our lifetime, it's for the future, it's for the future of the earth, it's for the future of the generations. And so we really have to understand the impact of our actions, and also, just understand that all these folks that are causing the harm, that accountability isn't going to come from them. So it really has to come from ourselves, and we need to do better at, not making people disposable, at, learning from our mistakes, and, really keeping that community alive.
Okay, there's a lot of things. I think one thing I would say is just to ask your elders to tell you stories. It doesn't matter where you're at or what you're doing, or if it's your neighbor or your nana. Just ask them to tell you a story. Tell me a story about, we just had Easter. Tell me a story about an Easter that you had, or tell me about this place, when you were younger or when you were my age. I, get so much wisdom from my nana because I go to her and I tell her my problems, and then she tells me her stories. And it's uncomfortable, and I don't necessarily see like my cousins doing that. And it's kind of weird, but I just get so much out of it, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do that. And you gotta look up from the phone to do it. You gotta put it down and then look somebody in the eye and be like, tell me your story. The other thing I think is that, yeah, for younger generations, like, it is so messy. It's so like, you don't know what you're getting into, there can be conflict, and it's okay to not run away from the conflict. You can hold it, you can care for it, you can work through it, and it's worth it in the end. And I fully respect people who have boundaries, for how they get treated by others, and that is 100% valid. But we're all different, we're not always gonna agree, but if we have come together for a specific purpose, and we really hold that purpose like in our heart, it's worth finding ways through that conflict. And that takes practice. It takes practice and sitting in the discomfort and asking questions and coming back together again and just doing it over and over again. And yeah, it's not a beautiful, like, romantic thing. It's hard and uncomfortable. But that's part of life.
All right, Desiree.
This isn't really advice so much as I was just thinking about how, like, we live in a world that pushes both young people and elders out. Like, they're meant to be, like, unheard and unseen. And it's so rare that I've been able to meet elders who are or were very, like, politically active, and when I do, it's like meeting a unicorn. It's so special. And then, like, for young people, it's like seeing a little, like, seedling growing and, like, wanting so badly for it to continue to grow and grow and grow. And so, like, all that is really, like, in my mind is, like, we need you. You, like, regardless of all the, like, BS that comes with organizing, like others have said, like, it's a mess, like, there's very little personal accountability, people's beef gets in the way, it's so dumb. Like, regardless of all of that, like, we need you so badly. And I don't, like, want anyone to forget that you are needed for not just, like, for the greater picture of things, but you on an individual level and on a collective level are needed in this world. Like, we're here for a reason, and we need your energy. We need your life. I'm like losing the word that I'm looking for, but we need you. Is ultimately what I'm trying to say.
We all need each other. Thank you, panelists. I do want to open it up. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So does anybody have a question or comment for the panel? Angel.
First, I want to say thank you to y'all for sharing your stories and just being here, and to Dr. Taylor as well for the college. It's like great book. One thing that I have a question about that I think's been named a couple times is there's so much information, there's so many names that we call this stuff environmental justice, and I think it's really easy for us to tune out those words that we've heard because, especially intergenerationally, we very much have our own understandings and are very firm in them, despite having all the information. And I think a big thing I've noticed and gotten to see is kind of reconciling those different interests and why we show up. And a question I have is, a lot of times the values and principles behind the words we say get lost in kind of the definitions that we have and the buzz phrases. So what are the values and principles that you all in your own organizing work around water see as the active and applied ways that we show up in the community? What are the values and principles we can use to demonstrate environmental justice or reconciliation or whatever the words we use, land back, water is life, to describe?
something when I lost it. There's so many values and principles.
Emma?
I think, we might use different words, but we have the same feeling, and that's feeling for one another. Caring for one another, having compassion for one another, showing one another respect, I think is a big thing, that we need to remember. And we might call them different words, from back in the day to now, which I understand. My parents had different words than I would use, so it is something that does change. The words change, but the ideas and the values stay the same. Okay, the words might change, but we still have the same values of caring for one another as human beings. Or at least we should care for one another as human beings. Respect one another, respect others' voices. Let everybody's voice be heard. You want your voice to be heard, I want your voice to be heard. We need to hear everybody's voice. Everybody's voice needs to be at that table, everybody's voice needs to be educated, and everybody's voice needs to be heard.
I think one of the key things is agree to disagree on a lot of things. And I think that's where a lot of people have a misconception, sure, it's good to get into a healthy argument, right? I'm gonna learn from you, you're saying you can learn from me, or vice versa. I think when you're sending a message, try to be truthful, okay? When I talk, I've done my research, okay? I've read, this book right here is phenomenal, so if you have a chance to read it, I highly encourage you to do it, and take time to read it. Take time to read, going back 40 years with Jane Kay articles. It was so well written that I think it could be generational, right? And those words can't be forgotten, right? And we have to be the message carriers, right? And what's frustrating to me is a lot of people don't come and speak up, whether it's the youth or my generation, the generation before, if there's not a dollar sign attached to it. Okay, what's in it for me? Well, we want water, clean water for future generations. Are we getting paid for it? No. And that's the first thing, hey, how about that lawsuit, Jaramillo? There isn't a lawsuit. And I don't tell them, it's not for the lack of trying. You try to reach out to the attorneys. We reach out to attorneys nationwide. Even the fellow that Dark Waters came out with a movie, Dark Waters. I highly encourage to see that movie. Rob, I can't remember the last name. But that's a great movie. But it's all about the almighty dollar. How about our health? It's more important than any of the health of our future generations. To me, that's what's important. Indigenous folks, what had happened to them, right? And the suffering that they had gone through centuries, right? Those are the things that we have to think about. And that's generational, okay? And communication, don't feel to reach out. Don't be afraid to come to the meeting and speak up. And I think fear is fear itself, right? And ask those hard questions to the powers to be. What are you doing for us? And continue, in Spanish there's a saying, la misma canción, same old song, right? Well, we're gonna sing it till we put my ass in the grave. Right? And we have to. It's important that they listen to us. It's important for the younger generation to be listened as well. You bring a powerful message, right? And that's why we're here. Nobody's paying us to be here. It'd be nice.
To be fair, they're getting paid to be here.
We wouldn't come anyway.
I do it because the love of my community, the love of my people. And it doesn't matter who you are, because we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same shithole. I mean, when it comes to water, it's bad, nationwide, worldwide, and we're all having the same issues, fighting the same battles. And you know, the folks in Mexico, the mining industry down in Cananea, they're stuck in the Rio Sonora drought, right? That they were pumping water to take it out to the mine, and forget the folks in the communities that were out there, and the ejidos, right? Do those folks they stood up and fought those guys. I mean, they literally fought them, and they won, okay? But if they would stay there with their mouth shut, you know, money can't buy you your health. You know, and the lawsuit that happened back in the 90s, I'm happy those people got compensated, right? Because a lot of them deserve it. A lot of the folks that are in the book here were our classmates. They deserved it because they were ill. But by the same token, there were a lot of folks that were not ill, they got compensated. Was that right? Absolutely. I mean, why would you even want to go there? You know, I had heard about it, but at the time I wasn't sick. Okay? So I said, they deserve the money to whatever they're gonna do with it. Right? But to me, it was a Band-Aid. Okay? They didn't have big guilt, and the illnesses still continue to this day. Okay? Thank you.
I really love that. I really love, you know, keeping people accountable, especially, you know, when it's hard. I think that's, you know, I was not a popular person growing up. You know, I wasn't well liked, and so, you know, when I you know, the border wall happened, and we had our arrest, and there was a little bit of popularity there. And I was just like, gosh, it's so nice to have like people like, you know, tell you good job and praise you. And I felt like I got a little soft. Like, you know, like, you know, I wouldn't want to say things on social media or out there that people weren't gonna like. And you know, I get really frustrated with myself when I have those thoughts, because I'm like, you know what, you know, if we're gonna really do this thing, we have to hold people accountable even when it's hard. Even when, you know, people are gonna boo you and throw tomatoes at you, you know, you still need to do it, you know? And so I think that's, for me, that's one of the hardest things is, you know, dealing with that popularity. It's like, hey, you know, I really enjoy when, you know, folks aren't, you know, saying, boo, you suck, you know? But it's hard sometimes, especially when, you know, for example, you know, we have a lot of, you know, nonprofits in the area. In Ajo, a lot of our nonprofits are funded by Freeport Memorial. And they're just doling out scholarships like crazy. And it gets really hard, especially when you know and love folks that are, you know, accepting all this hush money. And, you know, it gets harder and harder to speak out. And so that's been a constant challenge to myself, is to, you know, keep speaking out, even when it's, you know, you're not gonna get that approval, you know, from everybody. And I think that's something that you know, it's a continual thing that I have to work on, because, you know, especially in these times where things are so scary, you know, you want that love and kindness all around you, and so sometimes it's not the easiest thing.
So we have 5 minutes left. Is there anybody else that has a pressing question? Yolanda?
I don't have a question,
Okay.
but I have a comment. I'm gonna use my outside voice.
Okay.
Okay.
That's an inside joke, by the way. Okay.
Then it'll be a really outside voice. Okay. The only thing I would like to add to everybody's mindset is changing water is life. That's not true anymore. We need to change the mindset to say clean, safe water is life. And I've got, in my family now, 7 generations. So that's all I wanted to say. But thank you for your acknowledgement of my comments at the UCAB. Thank you for encouraging people to come to UCAB. And as you said, cat got your tongue when I call out Roger.
I think, we're actually at, oh, okay, Alex has a question.
I was just. So, I really like that we have our elders here, and I'm glad that you acknowledged that, our lifespan has changed. And so my great grandmother lived to her 90s, and, you know, my mother died at 52 from cancer, and we grew up on the south side, and, she grew up on military bases, and so I'm wondering, speaking to the elders, what you see in your children and their children, what's their consciousness of what they know that their elders went through and fought for? Cause I feel like I'm more radical than my parents were. You know, they weren't really attuned to the environment. But seeing my mother die, you know, seeing just her generation, my whole family has had a lot of early death. You know, I'm like, what did you guys do? Like, were you just like, and so like, I don't know, I'm just curious what you see in your children, and how in your families you've tried to spread that knowledge. And then from the other side, like, all I can do now as a mother is to impart that conscientiousness to my son, because I think somewhere it got lost. And my own observation, at least growing up in the South Side, is that my mom's generation went the opposite way, because their parents were very, you know, don't waste water, you know, you don't need to buy that. And then my mom's generation was like, yeah, I'm gonna buy it. And then that poor poverty mindset got switched when they became middle class. And so then it's, oh, I don't want my kid to ever want for anything. And so then it's, and, you know, just to point out, it's our rampant capitalism is really the underpinning of all of these problems, because these mines are very much related to metals we need for technology, and like, it all feeds into a system, and if we don't have a mine here, it's gonna be somewhere else, because the desire and the need for it, it hasn't gone away in our culture. And so really that's, to me, some of the root. And so I'm curious, with the elders, how have you seen it in your children and like in your families, and is it a familial anxiety? Like, I'm just wondering about that.
Yes, it actually is discussed quite a bit, you know, as far as my family is concerned. I think maybe a lot of it too has to do with the amount of people that have died in my family, my aunts and things like that. And just talking about the pollutions throughout, not just in the water, but in the air and in our works. And my two aunts that passed away in their, early. They both worked at a laundromat, and you know, they never had anything as far as protective gear. And so, you know, I feel like since their parents, you know, lived for a very long time, and here they both died very young with different things, cancers, dementias, Alzheimer's, all that, that it had to have been, you know, their environment. You know, there was no other thing, it wasn't hereditary, it had to be in their environment. And so I talk about those kind of things with my children, and my grandchildren now are hearing and understanding and seeing me go to different things having to do with the environment. So it's important to talk to your children about it, and also to make sure that they know that they've got to keep up with their health. You know, because it is something that if they're not careful as far as the environment is concerned, it can come up and bite them before they know it. My children have been affected by the TCE that I drank. It's generational. You know, a lot of my family's friends, a lot of my friends, as far as the females are concerned, many of them have had hysterectomies in their 20s and 30s. We're supposed to be having babies in our 20s and 30s, not hysterectomies. But because of the TCE, my generation, many of them have had it. And now I'm seeing it from my kids, not my kids, they've had some different other female issues, but I've seen it from my friends' kids that are having early hysterectomies. And it's all, you know, this generational thing, so we need to keep reminding them about this stuff. We need to keep reminding them how important it is to keep our waters safe. and not contaminated, and to fight for the, against those people that are contaminated. We need to they saw me fighting brush wildmen. They saw me out there walking the streets, going door to door, out in front of the plants. You know, I was a school board member, and I fought them from the dais. You know, I made sure that our schools that were near there, you know, had air monitors that were showing things, seeing things. So, you know, I was able to show my kids and their friends the things that we were fighting for. So you need to do that. You need to make sure your children know, you know, how important it is for us to keep our, how important it is to keep our environment clean. That this thing that people sometimes joke, well, it's climate related, it's not a joke. You know, and it's something that's getting worse and worse. So we need to continue to involve our children and our grandchildren. Don't think that, oh, they're too young, you don't wanna scare them. You know, the scary thing is that they don't fight it themselves, and then we don't fight it and they get sick. We can't allow that. We can't have that happening. We have to protect them. We have to protect ourselves. So we can't just be not talking about it. We need to talk about it in our homes. We need to talk about it with our neighbors. We can't be like it used to be. Everything's hush hush. So we don't want to hear, you know, what the neighbors or what your cousins, you know, ailment is. We don't want to hear about the cancers. We can't do that anymore. We've got to talk about it. Talk about it with one another. Talk about it with our neighbors. Talk about it with our kids. And make sure that our kids know, you know, how important it is. Because, you know, it involves them. It involves their lives. So we need to make sure that they're part of the conversation. You know, and it's hard. You know, especially, you know, for those of us that have lived this, you know, we talk about all of our health issues. But in reality, you know, we talked also to Dan Sullivan over at the university in the psychology department. It's also affected us in our mind. A lot of us have post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. I cannot drink water out of a faucet. I can't put a glass underneath it. It's just too hard. And that comes from knowing, you know, how I was poisoned for so long. And so my children see that. And it's okay for them to see that it's hard on them, because we need to not hide it anymore. We need to talk about it. And that's you know what I think. Whether it's hard or not, we have to do it.
I just want to say, don't be afraid to speak up, right? Whether you're young, old, whatever, speak the truth, and speak direct. And no matter a lot of folks, it feels like you're talking to the wall. But you know what? Eventually it's going to sink in, and you're going to break that wall down. So you have to continue speaking. That's what my kids do. I've taught that to my kids. You know, and they're in their 40s. Your voice is the most important thing that you have, for not only for yourself, but for others as well.
Well, thank you all so much. Really grateful for you being in attendance. Thank you to our panelists. It does. Thanks for making it work. Please, if there's any donuts left, please eat them so I don't get full. And we have more information about Los Descendientes. If you want to sign up for a toxic tour, or an opposite of the toxic tour. They used to call them toxic tours back in the day, but Mr. Jaramillo offered to set one up. I want to go, so there will be at least one person. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Eric. Thank you, Pima. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. Almost done. Thank you. Oh no, it's okay. How is like everyone knows you, so you're good. Thank you. Yes. I like this. Oh, nice. Oh, like yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's I go camping out there. Yeah, our water. We'll talk soon.
Not enough, not enough work. I haven't, I don't want to say I don't want to get you on the spot. I wish I knew it more happening. I'm glad that totally. Oh, thank you.
I'll see you.
I'm gonna think of whatever you need. I mean, if as loose as you look at it.
Sorry. Not being refreshed knowledge.
I was gonna say, have you been to the market?
I know, right?
It's kind of in between us and
Yeah, did you say $10? No.
Uh,
Oh, $10. I thought you said I got $10 and I was like, for shipping.
Yeah.
Did I write?
Like,
Forget
it's
0?
$10.
Okay.
Yeah, we could do it in the afternoon. I'm leaving it late.
I want to say I don't have
I could do, the only thing I have is like, we can do,
so much for me.
You can keep it at this point if you would like to.
Still care.
Yeah, it should be good.
Okay.
Come out as an adult and start talking to I'm like, if they died and they were 20, that was TCE. It wasn't a car accident, or especially if it's individual, it's TCE.
When I talk about, yeah, I should go to church.
It's there.
Thanks for being here.
Eric filmed it, so it might have gotten everything.